So thank you all. And I'll get started with some introductions in Zoom. And as people join in, we'll get into the meat of the presentation in a few minutes. But my name is Laura. I'm the Director of Operations for Riley's Way. And we're really excited to have you here at our Kind Leadership series with Coalition Z. Riley's Way is a nonprofit that empowers young leaders to use kindness and empathy to make meaningful connections and positive change. And our Kind Leadership series is one way that we showcase a variety of different leaders from across the country doing their work, talking about what they do, why they do it, and how kindness plays a role in that work. So we're really excited to have you here. Just a little bit of Zoom housekeeping before we get started. We are using the webinar feature today, so you can see us and hear us, but the way for you all to communicate with us is to use the chat feature. You can put your questions into the chat, into either the panelists and attendees or just the panelists, and we'll get to the questions. Or you can also use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen to ask direct questions to us, and all of the panelists will be able to see the questions that you ask, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. So if you have any questions or any issues, if you have any Zoom issues or any other questions like that, please let myself or Lauren know and in the chat, and we can get you some help too. But we're really excited to have you here. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Lauren.
Hi, everyone. I am such a fan of Coalition Z and have been for a while. And our work at Riley's Way is about bringing kind youth leaders together, and you exemplify this. By the way, I'm Lauren Shankman. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships at Riley's Way Foundation, and I go by she, her. And I want the three of you to do all the talking, but I got to know Charlotte quite a bit when you became one of our Call for Kindness partners. And you are one of the most passionate people I've met. And you really talk about the power to transform political leadership. And you've really walked the walk about creating a new collective future. When I look at your work around voter turnout, I'm blown away about what a difference you and your team made. So will you introduce us to your colleagues and panelists and friends? And I'll come back on for the Q&A. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. Like Lauren said, my name is Charlotte. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a senior here in New York, and I am one of 3 executive directors of Coalition Z. I first got involved with the organization when I was a freshman and loved it so much that eventually became one of the 3 executive directors. And here we have Audrey and Mehek. Audrey is our current press director and a chapter leader. She'll tell you a little bit more about herself. But what's super exciting is that Audrey is one of 3 people who will be taking over the organization as I and the 2 other executive directors transition to college. So Audrey and Mehek, if you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Yeah, so I'm Audrey, she, they pronouns, and I'm also from New York. I'm a junior, and like Charlotte mentioned, I'm a press director, chapter leader, and I'm excited to be one of next year's executive directors. I got involved with Coalition Z early last year when I first learned about Coalition Z's advocacy work initiatives, and I thought it would be an amazing way to serve as a positive force for change in my community, as well as just like an amazing opportunity to build connections and empower others to bring tangible change nationwide. The chance to inspire civic engagement in other youth and my peers, their kindness and support, and the chance to grow as a leader has just been amazing, and I'm excited to be here.
Hi, my name is Mehek. I'm also a senior, like Charlotte said, I'm from California, and I'm super excited to be here. My pronouns are she, hers. I first got involved with Coalition Z in 11th grade, and I've been state director and chapter leader for the last 2 years. And I decided to be involved with Coalition Z because I was inspired by their mission of connecting youth with local government and providing so many young people with the platform to speak and engage with each other. I think that's really important in a time where we need more empathy and discussion in order to really move forward. And yeah, that's mainly why this organization has become so important to me, because it's a platform for conversation.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen so we can tell you a little bit more about our work and what we do. Um, oh, can you see the presentation? No, shared my wrong screen. No. Okay, we're going to try this again. Success? Success, awesome. So like I said before, we are Coalition Z, and we're super excited to be here today. So Coalition Z at its very basis is a national youth-led progressive political action organization. We look to reimagine this country's political future by connecting Generation Z with civic engagement opportunities before they are eligible to vote. So we do have a lot of members who have reached the age of 18, but most of our members are younger than 18, and they got involved with Coalition Z before they turned 18. In terms of our demographics, we have over 40 chapters in 18 different states. We have a youth cabinet with 8 members from across the country. Each member of that cabinet has a policy area that they are essentially expert in. We have over 500 registered members and over 1,000 young people participate in our work annually, whether they are members or not. So our events and our initiatives are open to all. Our organization structure is such that we have a strong central base. So we have an executive team like Audrey, who is our press director, who work on delivering our mission across the country. And then we have chapters that are part of state coalitions. MEHEC leads one of them in California. And we try to create this balance between centralized leadership and guidance and essentially inspiration that creates this collective, and then also a localized impact because we feel like some of the issues that affect our generation most happen locally, and we want to make sure that our mission is dispersed throughout communities. Also, a note on that is part of what is driving our polarized state is the de-emphasis of local politics. And we really feel like we need to be part of the movement to connect people with local politics again, so that these mega identities that have become our politics are essentially kind of disintegrated as people reconnect with the issues that affect them on a daily basis. And a lot of that is local. All politics are always local.
Yeah, adding on to that, as Charlotte was saying, I definitely think as state director, I can speak to the fact that I've had a lot of independence and flexibility in the way that I do things in my state, but I've also had the constant support of Charlotte and the rest of the executive team, which has been great, especially when it comes to organizing local events, but also reaching out nationally and having, especially when we've had this digital era of different calls online, having people from all over the nation hop on and join in, even though it's a localized event, has been a great experience overall.
Awesome. Moving on. So to talk a little bit about our theory of change, we have a very data-driven theory of change. You can see down here that there's this website from Tufts University. They have a lab at Tufts, which collects a ton of data about civic engagement, specifically among Generation Z, and how we can change our systems to essentially engage people at the time where it'll have the most impact. So all the data tells us that when young people register to vote before turning 18, the majority of them, so over 50%, vote in their first presidential election. And when a voter votes in their first presidential election, they are significantly more likely to become a lifetime voter and engage in other civics activities. That being said, only 6% of high schoolers are asked to register to vote in school, which means that we are missing young people at the time in their lives when it most matters. So we need organizations like Coalition Z. We need student-to-student organizing to make sure that we reach these young people at a time where it most matters. We can engage them, we can set up a lifetime of engagement, and we can together, through this engagement, create a different collective future that prioritizes our values. So in terms of how our mission manifests in everyday work, we essentially have a 4-pronged approach. The first of which is voter registration. All of our chapters do annual voter registration drives in their communities. We have a national voter registration week every single year. The second is electoral organizing, which is essentially figuring out how we can best elect progressive champions who are in tune with our generation to office. So we pair young people to work on campaigns as volunteers and interns, and we host a lot of trainings taught by professionals on organizing to ensure that we are electing progressive champions to office. The third is education. We host Know Your Rights events, teach-ins, meet and greets. We host Meet Your Representative town halls to make sure that young people know what their rights are, what their options are, and know how powerful their voice can be. So we've done these events on Title IX, we've done them on climate justice, we've done teach-ins about voter registration, and whatnot. And then the fourth, but not final nor least, is legislation. So we support and lobby for legislation that focuses on key issues impacting our generation. We have done lobbying trips, both virtually and in person, to state capitals to advocate for legislation. And our youth cabinet consults candidates and elected officials on the policy priorities of our generation. So when I mentioned our youth cabinet beforehand, each member of our youth cabinet has a policy specific focus. So there's one person that is very invested in climate policy. There's another person that's invested in labor policy, another that's invested in international relations and whatnot. And so they come to these conversations really knowing their stuff and holding the people that are either running for office or have already been elected accountable. Here are some of our policy priorities. We put out a policy platform every year that is written by our policy director. It is essentially a renewal of our mission statement, where we look at what has been proposed in federal legislative chambers, and we decide what to support, and it drives our work for the year. So some examples of the stuff that we support: we supported the cancel rent bill that Ilhan Omar put forward during the pandemic. We support the Green New Deal. We support a bunch of different bills to increase the presence of unions across various fields in this country, campaign finance reform, etc. And also our state chapters oftentimes put forward state policy positions that are local. So we have a New York policy platform, an Illinois policy platform. I believe Texas has one. And those are essentially the state versions of whatever our federal policy is. Okay, so here are some examples of our events. This is our evening of action that we held after the Parkland shooting, when we had tons of chapters doing walkouts in solidarity with the Parkland victims and also advocating for better gun control. These are two survivors who became leaders of the March for Our Lives movement. Here you can see two of our members doing canvassing for a district attorney candidate in Queens. We do a lot of days of action for different candidates that are running for office. We've had a team go out to Staten Island a bunch to support Max Rose. We've had people go out to deep Queens, deep Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, all across the city and other states as well to support various candidates. A lot of our chapters, including MEHEX, organized Black Lives Matter protests or participated or helped organize them this summer. Here we have a picture of the New York Times Sunday op-ed page where Coalition Z was featured in an article written by Richard Rothstein, who is the author of The Color of Law and a professor at UC Berkeley. He wrote about how organizations like Coalition Z are trying to essentially bring together Generation Z to advocate for a new future. We had a political leadership conference this summer where we had 6 different workshops on very pertinent issues. Here we have the police policy advisor at the ACLU talking about policing and how young people can help reimagine what public safety looks like. And here, as I already mentioned, we do a lot of lobbying, and here's one of our trips to Albany that I think was done in 2017. I believe that was 2017. We were sent up there in conjunction with NYC Votes to advocate for new voting legislation, which actually got passed in the 2019 legislative session, and it was put in place for the first time during this year's election. So early voting, pre-registration, a bunch of different basic voting guarantees that New York didn't have. And here we have some examples of our initiatives. This is not everything at all. This is just a snapshot of some of the stuff we've done in the past. Here we have our youth cabinet meeting with Julie Oliver, who was a super awesome congressional candidate in Austin, I believe, outside of Austin. There are 4 congressional districts in Austin because Texas is super gerrymandered. And she was not able to win her race, but she was awesome. And I hope she runs again just because she's so articulate and has lived so much experience. Here we have a map of all the different campaigns that we paired young people to this year in partnership with the GAP project. We paired a bunch of people to campaigns up and down the ballot, from municipal races to state races to federal races. Here's our youth cabinet meeting with Bill de Blasio when he was a candidate. Now he is mayor of New York. I believe that was his re-election campaign. We had an initiative where we were getting our chapters and our state coalitions to host Title IX teach-ins in their schools and communities. We hosted one in New York. Here are 4 panelists who spoke to us about the importance of Title IX and sexual harassment protections. This summer and fall, one of our most popular initiatives was the Swing Coalition, where we paired 200 young people to do student-to-student organizing in swing states for the Biden campaign. We partnered with Blue Future, who provided us with weekly organizing trainings for our young people, Settle for Biden and the GAP project. We had our fellows who did 8 to 10 hours of organizing a week, and then our super volunteers who did 2 to 4. That was really awesome. Audrey, I believe you were a fellow, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I was a fellow in Michigan with the Swing Coalition. Like Charles said, one of over 200 people we paired, which was amazing. So I worked with the Michigan Democratic Party, and through training with Coalition Z and one of our partners, Blue Future, I learned about student-to-student organizing, voter outreach, which emphasized the power and necessity of kindness and building connections when advocating for a candidate or discussing their policies. And it's honestly, I learned how it's one of the best ways to connect with a voter or a peer to just affect change.
Like I mentioned before, we have some partners that we've been really lucky to work with in the past. Riley's Way has to be added to this spread. So in terms of our impact, something that I think I want to just say before we go through these numbers is I think Coalition Z promotes kindness and empathy in that, firstly, helping people realize their potential to create change and to be advocates and activists and realize their own agency is a beautiful thing that I think is inherently kind. And second of all, the policy we promote and the future we are trying to build is one where it's one that's humane, where people's dignity as human beings are recognized and guaranteed, and where collaboration among different communities is not only emphasized, but it's incentivized. And so it's been such an honor to get to work with so many passionate young people who share this vision and are really motivated to get to work to build it.
So yeah, adding on to that, to transition to the impact that we've made, all of these young people have come together and joined these chapters, which is more than 35 chapters now, and into 15 new states. And since the founding in 2016, we have registered more than 3,000 people to vote across the country. And as Audrey was talking about the sewing campaigns earlier, we paired 200 young people to vote for this Biden campaign in swing states as student organizers. And then the 2020 election actually had the highest voter turnout in history. And we definitely encouraged people to go out there and vote through our platform. And we've paired 150 young people to campaign up and down the ballot, and most of our candidates actually won their elections. Our lobbying work has also driven more than 20 pieces of municipal and state legislation to become law, as well as federal legislation to be passed in the House.
So moving forward, we have a lot of new work that we're working on that Audrey has largely been leading.
So as one of next year's executive directors, we're definitely looking towards continued nationwide expansion. Most of our reach is congregated in predominantly blue states right now, but we're definitely going to strive to fix that by doing more outreach and just trying to expand throughout to other states. We're also going to plan on matching students to local campaigns throughout 2021. Again, drawing back on what Charlotte said, emphasizing the importance of local impact and then statewide campaigns for the midterm elections in 2022. We're also looking towards revamping our organizational structure, so definitely creating more of a balance between centralized and a decentralized organization just to maximize our impact on both a local and a national level, and just to create more infrastructure to join without being a member of a chapter already, and creating accessible resources just to affect change. And we also plan on just increasing our lobbying work across all policy priorities in all states, obviously post-COVID. So that's it. To learn more about us, please check out our website, coalitionz.org. I believe it was dropped in the chat a little bit before. To start a chapter, fill out our form on the website. You can also join our events and initiatives without having a chapter by just keeping up with our socials, and we'll be posting updates on there and you can get involved like that. If you have any questions or just want to get involved with Coalition Z, feel free to reach out to us through Twitter, Facebook, our website, or Instagram. And you can email us at info@coalitionz.org.
Well, that was amazing, and I took a lot of notes. Our chat is, our Q&A is full right now, so I'm going to read some questions in the order they came in. How do you connect with politicians for people to intern or work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, we're very practical about it. We email a bunch of people, a bunch of campaign managers, and ask if they want help. They almost always want help. I will say this, aside from Coalition Z, if you are a young person that is interested in working on a campaign, do not be shy about it. People are so happy to have your help, and there's always a task for you to do. So we love to be the middle woman, man, person between campaigns and young people, but you can email and set something up. We've been able to create programs with a bunch of different campaigns through just emailing them and getting in touch with them.
Thank you. Our incredible executive director put a question in this chat. Dr. Christine O'Connell asks, do you have any stories of people who were in Coalition Z and now running for office?
Yeah, no, because we are a very young organization. That's something that we probably should have mentioned a little bit earlier, but we were founded in 2016 after President Trump's election. And so our oldest graduates are now sophomores in college. So we haven't quite been around long enough to have any alumni run for office, but hopefully in a few years we'll see some.
Not yet. We're waiting and ready to vote. Okay, the next question in the chat is, how did Coalition Z get started? And how did you each personally get involved?
Yeah, so like I said before, Coalition Z was started in 2016 by 3 kids actually at Dalton in New York City. They transitioned to college. I got involved when I was a freshman. I became New York State director with the 2 other people that I'm now executive director with. And so when they transitioned to college after founding the organization, we stepped in um, and made it our own. Audrey and Mahak, if you guys want to jump in, please. That's just my personal origin story.
Yeah, so I got involved last year through specifically, I believe it was a toolkit to repeal Hecht Calandra, which I don't know how many guys are from New York, but basically that's just the specialized high school exam, and it's pretty inequitable. It basically favors those with a position of privilege to access specialized high schools, which in turn gives them easier access to higher education like college. So Coalition Z put out a toolkit to repeal Hecht Calandra, and I was like, wow, this work is amazing. So I kept up with Coalition Z and then saw that they were putting out a call for new executive board members. So I applied to be a press director and I got here. And then in the fall, I started my own Coalition Z chapter in my own school.
So, as for me, I'm from California, so there wasn't a lot of Coalition Z involvement in my state in particular, but I did see Coalition Z on Instagram and the things that they were posting. And then I decided to contact the directors and see if I could be involved in any way. And they were really kind and talked me through the process so I could set up my own chapter in California and just like kickstart different events in my own area and get people involved across the state eventually.
Wow. One piece that's not here, but I'd love as a follow-up. Your mission is really interesting in terms of the legacy plan. Will you talk a little bit about that for a moment?
The legacy plan in terms of
How you pass on leadership.
how we pass on leadership. Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. I think it was important to not only the founding executive directors, but also to us that we leave the organization behind when we go to college, because kind of that theory of change that I talked about a little bit that we presented in those slides about how we're really trying to target people before they're eligible to vote to create this connection with civic engagement before that very tangible form of civic engagement is available to people, to folks. And so we put out a call for new executive directors, and we were specifically looking for people who were already part of our organization, who had kind of shown their leadership, worked on our projects before, were familiar with the mission statement, and we got so many awesome applicants. We went through an interview process. And we are now welcoming a cohort of 3 people again, which we kind of have found is the sweet spot. It helps people manage the big workload that is being an executive director of this organization. And it allows for a lot of different diversity and expertise. So some people are more into the kind of communication stuff. Some people are more into the management stuff. Some people are more into the strategic stuff. So that was the process. And now we're going through a 10-week transition where we're essentially going through lessons learned, handing over all of our passwords and also all of our like relationships, teaching them how to use MailChimp, just the different skills that we've had to acquire in this position. And we're having some really awesome conversations about mission and about infrastructure and how we can best take our work to the next level.
I love it, but I won't be handed over. The next piece, I'm just kidding. The next question is, and I put it in the chat too, what is your most memorable story doing this important work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There are so many good memories, but I think my favorite memory is my sophomore year when we organized a Meet Your Representatives town hall at the Center for LGBTQ Rights in the West Village. And we had all these young people come, and all these elected officials were there, and people were just talking. They were just asking them about speed bumps, but also about like school funding and about like public health infrastructure, and also like why a tunnel has been closed for too long. So the issues just had so much range, and there was so much accessibility, and there was so much interaction between those who represent us and young people who are often left out of that conversation because we are not part of the electorate. And it was awesome to see, and everyone had so much energy and vibrancy, and it was a beautiful day and a beautiful space. And I know I personally just felt very proud of pulling the whole thing off with two other young people. It was a good feeling, and it was awesome to see everyone connect and network. And a lot of the people that were there, both elected officials and young people, have stayed with the organization. So Helen Rosenthal, who's a city council member from the Upper West Side, she is one of our biggest adult allies, as is Brad Lander, who is from Brooklyn, and he's now running for comptroller. So we have been able to give those connections some longevity, and they've been so gracious with their time. And yeah, if you guys want to.
Yeah, Audrey, I want to hear, what is one of your most memorable stories about doing this important work?
I think in terms of my own chapter, I got to plug Coalition Z members into Young Dem Swim Banks, and if you guys remember the runoffs in Georgia, so I got to pair people with the Ossoff and Warnock campaigns, which is amazing, just like our campaign pairing initiative on a smaller scale. And then I think I can't pinpoint one specific thing, but I definitely think something that's always sticks with me is explaining. I think a lot of people are sometimes intimidated about the amount of knowledge you need, quote, to get involved with politics or to start organizing, but you actually don't. And I think it's really great when people get to have their own experiences, and it sets them up for honestly a lifetime of civic engagement. And I think when people express that they have learned so much and that they feel safe and empowered to speak up in these spaces now because of all the knowledge they've gained through like me pairing on campaigns and also just all of us working together in a safe environment, I think that's just really great.
Nick, I would love to hear your most memorable story.
Of course. So my most memorable story, I think, would have been an event that my chapter hosted in collaboration with the Santa Clara County Department of Education, where we basically had different families from specific areas that had low census turnouts come out to an event where we had an information session on why the census is important, and basically had young people register at voter booths. And it was just like a really lively environment. And we had so many different Coalition Z volunteers come and help set up and engage and talk, and also realize the importance of census themselves. Yeah, I think it was just a good environment. And a lot of people learned new things and engaged with each other, which is what the main point of the event was. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite memories.
Wow. The next question I also put in the chat that we have is, many people are feeling disillusioned by politics and that their voice doesn't make a difference. What would your advice be to them, especially to the younger people on this call?
Yeah, I think this is one of the best times to be a disillusioned person in politics, because there is so much evidence around us that government works. In that we went from essentially a state of chaos and disaster where people were dying because of a public health threat that hadn't been anticipated or prepared for, to then more or less restoration of confidence and competence, where we now have a very impressive vaccine rollout. Vaccines are free. They are being distributed very, very quickly, considering that there was no infrastructure for them beforehand. We have so much happening in our legislative bodies. We have stimulus coming. Like, there's just so much happening around us, and it's all because government is working in a way that it hasn't in a long time. So I think that, first and foremost, it's important that we recognize how hard it is to organize society, and then all the different evidence, all the different pieces of evidence around us that society is being organized. Like, there are small miracles happening every day that make our existence work. Like, the post office and our public health infrastructure and our transportation systems. So there's a lot to be hopeful about, I think. And the only reason why, we've gotten so much done so quickly is because of dozens of thousands of votes in a few swing states that made it possible. So every single vote really did count this election cycle, even though Joe Biden won by like 7 million votes. It may be more than that at this point. It was a handful of votes in really key states that that made it happen. If you guys want to add anything, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest thing is definitely, we talked about it in the talk again, like definitely the importance of local politics. I think when you vote up and down the ballot on just like a midterm election, voting for your city council member, it really allows you to see the tangible impacts of what voting does and how government functions. Because oftentimes you think of politics, you think of presidential elections, what's going on a national scale. And it is really easy to feel discouraged when there's so much going on around you. But I think it's really great to be more active in, more grassroots and local things. And through that, you can definitely see directly the impact that you're making and how it can better the lives in your own community.
I just put something in the chat I want to make sure you see. It's from one of my favorite people. Our board member, Mindy Jacobs, wrote, "It was nice getting to know more about Coalition Z. You're doing awesome work. If you're interested in meeting the Democrat chair of New York State, I'm happy to make that introduction." So I would take Mindy up on that. And then another question in our chat is coming from one of our co-chairs of one of our councils, the incredible Maya, who's asking, how have you transitioned your work, especially in organizing events online? Do you have any pieces of advice for our councils who are right now assembling an event remotely? Thank you, Maya.
That's a really great question. The digital transition has not been easy at all, but I think also there have been many silver linings to it in that there's so much that we've been able to do because of this online platform that we didn't even think of doing beforehand. And I think there are some things that we will continue to do online post-pandemic, just because they allow for so much more opportunity. For example, with a national organization, you have people in different time zones, in physical places that are very, very different. And so holding like organization-wide calls or hosting events online has a lot of advantages to it because it allows a lot more people to be present and active, and it allows for greater connections between different locations in a really awesome way. I think our biggest challenge with online events, because we got initially very excited by it. We were like, we have so much more time on our hands. There's so much we can do now that people don't have to be physically present to attend things, was first of all, Zoom fatigue. People get tired. And second of all, keeping people, up on their commitments. So we had to do a ton of communications work. And one of the executive directors, her name's Josephine, she worked for Ed Markey's re-election campaign in Massachusetts. And she learned all this incredible stuff about online communications. And so she made these spreadsheets and made these plans about how to get people to come to events and how to organize events so that like people's attention spans were kept consistent and stuff was like broken up in a certain way so that people stay present. Like it was really, really awesome, all this stuff she learned. So she was able to apply a lot of that to our events as well. And I think the two main things are, first of all, publicity spreadsheets where you post things in advance and get people excited for them over a sustained period of time, and then text everyone individually before the event to make sure they're all set. And the second thing is keeping the kind of sections of events short so that people can transition between them, but there's always something novel about them. And that's stuff that we only learned because we realized that like people were tired of being online all day, which is very fair.
Any other tips for community organizers online?
I would say stressing the importance of social media is a big one, especially if you want a huge youth turnout. I think more so than ever, we're turning to social media to build connections with each other. I think taking advantage of how much time a lot of us are just spending on social media now, and pushing a really effective social media campaign can be a really great way to engage turnout, and posting infographics, things that people are inclined to click through and reshare, can definitely help a lot in building these connections and encouraging people to meet each other online and just reach out, because it's so simple to connect with each other now.
This is one thing that I didn't say before, but I think we also learned that you should make things as easy as possible for people. Over the summer, we did a bunch of toolkits to get different legislation passed. And once we figured out how to use this tool, where essentially it creates an email for someone when they click a link and they only have to hit send, we got like 3 times more sends, even though it was just copying in an email to someone's browser. But just like that action of making it a few seconds less and psychologically much easier really helped.
I have a self-care question that just came up. I have a question in terms of prioritizing work, because a lot of the youth have many responsibilities and are stressed of trying to balance everything out. Any tips? And that could be for non-youth too. How are you taking care of yourself and still leading? How are you doing? How are the 3 of you taking care of yourself and leading?
Yeah, I think something that's really helped for me is just recognizing that I do need to rest. I think especially youth leaders, you're pretty inclined to just take on as much as you can. Totally understandable. You want to do so much. But I think the best thing for me, I've noticed, is just setting out a dedicated amount of time where I don't let myself think about work. I don't let myself think about school. I just let myself be present in the moment, relax, binge some Netflix, watch some YouTube, do whatever makes me happy, and letting myself have those spaces for myself. I try to reserve Sundays for myself. I try to give myself Friday nights, Wednesday nights, stuff like that. I think that's been really helpful, because if you force yourself to allow yourself to relax, at least for a little bit, it can actually go a long way, making sure that you don't get burnt out and having yourself keep to that. Also, journaling is helpful.
I definitely agree with that. I think that there has to be like a balance between work and your personal favorite things to do, because um, there a lot of the times people get burnt out, and then you're not able to do 100% whatever you're planning to do. And so for me personally, I think hanging out with my family, or just like setting aside time to play the piano or something else I would like doing, like Audrey said, I think I make sure that I find that balance. And also just like getting rest. I think sleeping more is good for your mental health, and like just taking that time off whenever you need it, and talking to the people that you care about and you know that they care about you whenever you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed can really help too.
Definitely agree with everything both of you guys said. I would just like to add that I think it's really important for the work that you do to feed your essence. And so we want everyone that's part of the Coalition Z team to feel like their work with Coalition Z feeds their essence, and makes them just a little bit more connected to what they feel is important. And sometimes that also means like stepping back and recognizing your limit, and taking time for yourself. And so we're trying to constantly create this like holistic infrastructure where there is not a lot of pressure on certain things, and people are becoming involved with it because they love it and they're passionate about it, and they feel comfortable saying when things are too much, or when they're ready to take on more. So we want there to be a recognition there around just self-care and taking care of yourself, especially in these organizing spaces where it's a lot of go, 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 go.
So much powerful and inspiring advice there, because you can't do the work if you're not taking care of yourself. But you're saying the work has to be also feeding your essence. Will you remind us again how we can, especially if we're 18 and younger, but even if we're older, how we can be part of Coalition Z? Tell us again how we can participate.
So So if if you have, most of our chapters are high school based, but you can actually start community chapters. So rallying together like a couple members from your community and applying and just letting us know that you want to be a chapter. We'll give you all the resources you need. So we supply with agendas, possible events, and just letting people know that here is how you can empower people to affect change through Coalition Z. Just applying to be a chapter is a really great one. In the next year, we're definitely planning on changing it so we can have more national groups. So if you don't belong to a chapter or there's not much Coalition Z participation in your state, you can still get involved through our events that we host, especially now that it's online. It's basically welcome to anybody, even if you don't have an established chapter in your area. And also we're going to start with some working groups. So that can be a great way to help as well, using our toolkits and just sharing. I think sharing information is a really great one too.
Is there any important legislation you think we should all be aware of right now? I'm sure there's a lot. You have many cabinets. But if there were like 3 top pieces that you wanted us to know about, or even 2, what are they?
Yeah, I think they change a lot. But as of right now, we are very focused on Biden's infrastructure plan, which is an amazing piece of legislation from our perspective and long overdue. If it gets passed, it's going to be essentially the best piece of economic policy for investing in like the working class that our generation certainly has ever seen. And alongside that, kind of the value statements of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal often gets branded as something that's radical or socialist. But what the Green New Deal is saying is that we all have to just radically transform, or I guess radical isn't the right word to use there, but we all have to transform our lives from the bottom up if we're going to have any future on this earth. And it recognizes that we have to make critical investments in various sectors of our economy, and we can do them with equity and recognizing just 21st century human rights that have long been forgotten. And we are very excited about that value statement, and think that the legislation that has come along with the Green New Deal, so it was just introduced, I think yesterday, there are 12 pieces of legislation that have been reintroduced by AOC, by Ed Markey, by Cori Bush, by a bunch of different people, and they correlate to cities, to agriculture, to various different parts of the country. The value statement and what they do are really, really important. So we would like to see the Green New Deal passed.
Either of the other panelists want to mention one other piece of legislation that you're really passionate about? Well, you can always get back to us, and I really can't wait to meet Josephine, who's going to tell us all the ways that we can connect with young people even better. But I'm going to bring Laura Kikuchi, my colleague, back to this webinar so we can see them. But I want to, before we have some closing, I want to give you the closing remarks before Laura does an announcement. But I also want to reiterate something you said right from the beginning. Realizing your own advocacy is inherently kind. Realizing your own agency is inherently kind too. And you've really inspired me, and I'm sure so many others, by your work, by your words, by your passion. And so I just want to thank you. Thank you for coming here, but thank you for all you're doing and all you're about to do. Before Laura makes some announcements, did the 3 of you have any sort of last thoughts you wanted to share with us?
I would just say, feel free to reach out. We are always happy to have new people ready to get involved. So.
Well, thank you all so much for being here with us. It was so inspiring to listen to you learn about your work, and I hope some of our attendees will be getting involved with you. We dropped the links to their website and social media in the chat, so please click through and send them some follows and likes, and stay in touch. Before we close, again, thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to invite all of you to attend our Call for Kindness celebration on May 6th. This is where we will be announcing the winners of our 2021 Call for Kindness, our national program where we offer grants and support and a network of different change makers to teens from across the country so that they can put their ideas into action on how they want to create a kinder, more just world. And so I'm dropping the link into the chat to register for our virtual event on May 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern. I hope the three of you come. I hope all of our attendees will join, and we really hope to see you there. It'll be a celebration of the past Call for Kindness fellows and the announcement of our current group. So we're really excited for it. But again, thank you all so much for being here with us tonight. And thank you for your amazing work, Charlotte, Mehek, and Audrey. It's just a joy to hear from you.
And we look forward to continuing our partnership. If you are also part of this panel today or outside of the panel and you're new to Riley's Way, you can follow us at Riley's Way Foundation. Laura will put that in the chat, but we hope to see you on May 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 4 p.m. West Coast time, right? Have a lovely rest of your day. Take care, be well, and continue on the important work.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.